She used to call me her daughter's friend, but every time our eyes met, it felt like we both knew that name didn't fit anymore. It started on an ordinary Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that never hints it might change something in your life. I'd gone to my friend Lily's house to work on a university project. She'd mentioned her mom might be around, but I didn't think much of it. When the door opened, the first thing I noticed wasn't her. It was the quiet hum of a home that felt lived in, the faint smell of coffee, a ticking clock somewhere in the kitchen, and that comfortable mess people only have when they're not expecting guests. Then she appeared at the end of the hallway. Lily's mom. She wasn't what I expected, not just older, but composed, graceful in a way that comes from years of knowing who you are. Her long black hair was pulled back loosely, and her eyes, dark, steady, gave the kind of look that makes you want to stand up a little straighter. "Hi," she said, voice low and kind. "You must be Evan." I nodded, suddenly aware of my own posture, my tone, even the sound of my voice when I said, "Yes, ma'am." She smiled, not teasing, just warm. "Ma'am? I haven't been called that in a while. You can just call me Claire." That moment lingered longer than it should have. She wasn't flirting. I knew that. But there was something about her presence, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence, that drew me in before I could even name why. As the afternoon went on, she moved around the house while Lily and I worked. I'd catch glimpses of her through the kitchen doorway, making coffee, opening the curtains to let the light in, occasionally pausing to ask if we wanted snacks or drinks. Every time she spoke, there was an ease in her tone, like someone who'd long stopped trying to impress people, but somehow impressed them anyway. At one point, Lily left the room to take a phone call, and it was just me and her mom, Claire, in that quiet living room. She smiled as she passed by, setting a mug down on the table near me. "You take it with sugar, right?" Lily said. "You do." I looked up, surprised she'd remembered. "Yeah. Thank you." Her eyes met mine for a moment longer than casual kindness should allow. Just a glance, nothing more, but it landed somewhere deep. Then Lily came back, breaking the spell, and the room felt normal again. But later that evening, as I walked home, the moment kept replaying in my head. Not because of anything she said, but because of how she said it, that calm, patient tone, the kind that made even simple words sound like they meant more. I told myself it was just respect, admiration for someone older, wiser. But deep down, I already knew there was something else beneath it, something neither of us could name yet. After that first day, I didn't expect to see her often. But projects stretch longer than you plan, and Lily's house became something of a second home over the next few weeks. Every time I came by, Claire, her mom, would be around. Sometimes she'd be reading on the porch, sometimes coming in from work just as we were wrapping up. It was never planned, never too long, but always enough to notice small things. The rhythm of her voice, the way she'd smile when she caught us laughing over something silly. There was a steadiness about her that pulled you in without trying. Even when she said little, you could feel she was fully there, listening, observing, quietly thoughtful. One late afternoon, I was sitting at the dining table, reviewing notes. Claire came in with grocery bags, her hair a bit windblown, sleeves rolled up, still in her work clothes, a pale blouse and navy slacks. I stood up automatically. "Here, let me help you with that." She looked at me with mild surprise, then gratitude. "You don't have to." "I know," I said, already taking a few bags from her hands. "But I want to." Her laugh was small but genuine, a soft sound that filled the quiet house. "Thank you, Evan." I could get used to that kind of help. It wasn't a flirtation. It was just warm. But in that warmth was a spark neither of us acknowledged. When our hands brushed mine reaching for a bag she hadn't yet let go of. The touch was brief, unintentional, but it felt like an entire sentence had been spoken in silence. She froze for half a second, then gently stepped back, clearing her throat. "You can just put those on the counter." "Sure," I said, trying not to let my voice sound as careful as it suddenly felt. The air between us had shifted, not heavy, but aware, like we'd stumbled upon a line neither of us meant to draw, yet both instinctively respected. The rest of the evening went on as usual. Lily joined us, conversation easy and familiar. But every so often, I'd catch Claire's glance from across the room. Fleeting, uncertain, but softer than before. Later, when I left, she stood at the doorway. "Thanks again for helping," she said. "Any time," I replied. Her smile was quiet, thoughtful. "You're a good one, you know that?" I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded, half smiling, feeling the weight of the moment hang there before she turned away. Walking home, I told myself it was nothing, just kindness, just politeness. But deep down, I knew what was really changing wasn't the time we spent together. It was the way I started to notice her, the way her presence seemed to fill the room, the way her laughter stayed in my head long after I'd gone. Something gentle had begun to move. Slow, quiet, but impossible to ignore. It happened on a Saturday evening that shouldn't have been any different from the others. Lily had gone away for a weekend trip, leaving me to drop off a few notes at her house before she returned. When I knocked, it was Claire who opened the door. She looked surprised, pleasantly so. Her hair was down this time, loose over her shoulders, and she wore a soft cardigan over a simple white top. The house felt quiet, calm, like the air itself was resting. "Oh," she said with a small smile. "I didn't realize you were coming by. I just wanted to drop off Lily's notes. She asked me to." She nodded, stepping aside. "Come in, then. I was just making tea. It should have been a quick visit. 5 minutes, maybe 10. But then she asked, 'Do you have time for a cup?' I hesitated, but the warmth in her tone made it impossible to say no. "Sure," I said. The kitchen smelled faintly of chamomile and lemon. She poured the tea with steady hands, sliding a cup toward me. We sat across from each other at the table, not far, but not close either. At first, the conversation was easy, work, life, small observations. But as the minutes passed, something shifted. Her words slowed. Mine did too. The pauses between them started to feel intentional. Gentle silences where meaning lived more in what wasn't said. She talked about raising her daughter, about how fast time had gone. Her eyes softened as she said it, a mixture of pride and melancholy. "I used to think I had everything figured out," she admitted quietly, tracing the rim of her cup with one finger. "And then life kept changing faster than I could catch up." I nodded. "I think that's kind of what growing up feels like, realizing nobody really does." She smiled at that, not just with her mouth, but with her eyes. "You're wiser than you look, Evan." I laughed softly, though something about the way she said my name made my chest tighten. Or maybe I just listen more than I talk. Her gaze lingered then, long enough for both of us to realize we'd crossed into something tender, the kind of silence that doesn't demand to be filled. Outside, the last of the daylight faded. The room glowed with warm lamplight, soft against the pale walls. She looked down at her cup, voice quieter now. "You should probably get going before it gets dark." I stood, slow to move, unsure if leaving was what either of us wanted. At the doorway, she said, "It was nice, talking like this." I met her eyes, and for a heartbeat, the air felt heavy, full of things we couldn't name. "Yeah," I said softly. "It was." When I stepped outside, the evening air felt cooler than it should have, as if the warmth of that room had followed me out, lingering somewhere behind my ribs. And from that night on, nothing between us felt quite the same. After that evening, everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. When I came over next, the small talk felt slightly off, as if both of us were trying too hard to sound casual. Lily chatted easily, unaware of the shift between us, while Claire and I exchanged quick, polite glances that never lasted long. There was a new kind of silence in the air. Not cold, just careful. She wasn't avoiding me exactly, but when she spoke, her tone carried a faint distance, a quiet effort to rebuild the space that conversation over tea had quietly erased. I told myself to do the same, to keep things light, friendly, ordinary. She was my friend's mother, kind, grounded, and utterly out of reach. Should have been easy, but it wasn't. Every time she entered the room, my awareness of her arrived first. The sound of her footsteps, the faint scent of her perfume, the warmth in her smile even when she was trying to hide it. One afternoon, Lily was running late for a study session. I ended up waiting in the kitchen, helping Claire fold some dish towels to pass the time. She looked composed as always, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up, a faint smudge of flour on her wrist from baking earlier. It was an ordinary scene, and yet every movement felt magnified. She handed me a folded towel, our fingers brushing for barely a second. Neither of us spoke. When she finally did, her voice was soft, steady, but with something trembling beneath it. "Evan, I think we should be careful about how much time we spend alone." I looked up. "Yeah, I know." Her eyes met mine for a moment before she turned away. "You're a good person. I don't want things to be misread." I nodded, though the word misread stung, because the truth was, I hadn't misread anything. I felt it. We both did. Lily arrived soon after, all energy and noise, and the air between us shifted back to normal, or something that tried to look like it. But as I left that evening, Claire didn't walk me to the door. I caught one last glimpse of her from the hallway, standing at the sink, staring out the window, her hands motionless in the dishwater. She wasn't indifferent. She was conflicted, and so was I. That night, I lay awake thinking about the space between right and almost, the fragile distance between something forbidden and something that feels simply true. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was the quiet ache of two people pretending not to see the same thing in each other's eyes. And somehow, pretending was starting to hurt more than the truth. The distance between us held for days, maybe weeks. We didn't plan it, but it happened naturally. Fewer visits, shorter talks, polite smiles that never stayed long enough to mean anything. At least, that was the intention. But life doesn't care about intentions. It was late afternoon when Lily called to ask if I could drop off her laptop charger. She'd forgotten it before heading out for a weekend trip again. When I reached the house, I expected to just leave it by the door. But as I turned to go, I heard Claire's voice behind me. "Evan." She stood at the doorway, barefoot, wearing a light gray sweater that hung loose at her shoulders. Her hair was still damp, twisted loosely behind her neck. There was something unguarded about her. The kind of softness you see when someone isn't expecting company. "I didn't mean to bother you," I said, holding up the charger. "You're not," she replied. "Come in for a minute." The house was warm, filled with that faint, lived-in scent of coffee and laundry soap. Afternoon light spilled through the windows, turning everything golden. She made tea again, her quiet ritual. I watched her move around the kitchen, graceful but a little distracted, like her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. We sat at the same table as before. The silence wasn't tense this time. It was just real. After a while, she spoke, eyes on her cup. "I've been thinking about what I said before, about keeping distance." I looked up slowly. "Yeah." She nodded. "You didn't do anything wrong. It's just, I didn't want to start feeling something I shouldn't." The words landed like a confession. Gentle, uncertain, and heavier than either of us expected. I didn't answer right away. My throat felt tight. What if it's already too late for that? Her breath caught, barely audible, but I saw the shift in her posture. The air seemed to thicken between us. "Evan," she said softly, warning and longing woven into one word. I leaned forward slightly, not to reach her, just to be closer to the truth. "I know you don't want this to be complicated. Neither do I. But every time I try to forget that night, or the way you looked at me then, I can't." She sat still, eyes glistening faintly in the soft light. And then the smallest, most human thing happened. Her hand trembled as she reached for her cup, and when I instinctively steadied it, our fingers met. This time she didn't pull away. Her hand stayed in mine, warm, deliberate, fragile. No words, no promises, just that quiet, undeniable truth between us. A single tear escaped her eye, though she smiled faintly. "You shouldn't make this harder." I shook my head. "Maybe it already is, but I don't regret it." For a long, unbroken moment we just sat there, two people suspended in something both impossible and utterly right. And outside, the light began to fade, wrapping the room in a softness that felt like understanding. The next few days passed in a blur of half-sent messages and quiet restraint. I wasn't sure if I should reach out, and she didn't either. Every thought of her came with a mix of warmth and guilt, two feelings that didn't belong together, but somehow had learned to coexist. When I finally saw her again, it wasn't planned. I was walking home from class when I spotted her at the small park near the edge of town, sitting alone on a bench beneath a sycamore tree. The late afternoon light shimmered through the branches, turning her black hair to deep bronze in the sun. I almost kept walking, but something in me wouldn't let me. She looked up as I approached, her surprise quickly softening into something gentler. "Hey," she said quietly, almost a whisper. "Hey," I replied, sitting beside her, leaving a polite space between us. Though even from that distance, I could feel her presence as if it were touching me. Neither of us spoke for a while. The sounds of kids playing in the distance filled the silence, grounding it. Finally, she sighed, not heavily, but as if letting go of something she'd been holding too tightly. "I've been trying to make sense of this," she said. "You, me, all of it." I turned toward her. "And have you?" She gave a small, sad smile. "Not really. Every reason I have to stay away makes perfect sense. And none of them matter when you're around." Her honesty hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't dramatic. It was just true. "I never wanted to make things complicated for you," I said softly. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." She looked at me then, really looked, her dark eyes full of conflict and care. "Neither did I. But the truth is, when you're here, I don't feel like I'm supposed to feel guilty for being alive. You make me remember what it's like to be seen again." Her voice trembled on that last word, and without thinking, I reached for her hand. She didn't resist. Her fingers tightened slightly around mine, the way someone holds on when they're afraid to let go. "You deserve to be seen," I said. "You always did." A single tear slipped down her cheek, catching the light. I brushed it away gently with my thumb, a touch that felt both natural and impossibly fragile. For a moment, the world shrank to just that, her hand in mine, her heartbeat close enough to feel. She exhaled shakily. "We can't stay like this." "I know, but just for now," she whispered. "Don't move." So I didn't. We sat there in quiet stillness. Two people who knew what they shouldn't feel, yet couldn't stop feeling it anyway. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a goodbye either. It was the kind of truth that needed no words, only presence. And for that brief moment, it was enough. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. After that afternoon in the park, we didn't speak for a while. There was no argument, no dramatic ending. Just the quiet understanding that something had to shift before it unraveled us both. Weeks passed, life went on. I still saw Lily at school sometimes, her usual bright energy unchanged. Every time she mentioned her mom, I felt a small ache, not of regret, but of remembrance. A silent gratitude for what had been shared and what we both had the strength to protect. Then, one Sunday morning, I saw Claire again. I'd stopped by to drop off a book Lily had lent me, half hoping she wouldn't be home, and half hoping she would. She opened the door, wearing a soft blue dress that brushed her knees, sunlight glowing behind her. For a moment, it felt like stepping back into a memory. "Evan," she said, her voice calm but kind. "It's been a while." I nodded. "Yeah." I wasn't sure if I should stop by. "You should," she said, smiling faintly. "You've always been welcome here." She invited me in for tea just like before, though this time, everything felt different. Not tense, not uncertain, just peaceful. We sat by the window where light streamed through the curtains. Her hair shimmered in the sun, and for the first time, I realized how truly at ease she looked. The ache in her eyes was gone, replaced by quiet strength. "How have you been?" I asked. "Better," she said softly. "Doing more things for myself. Letting life be simpler." I nodded. "That sounds good." She looked at me then, really looked, and for a heartbeat, the air felt familiar again. But it wasn't the same kind of silence we used to share. It was acceptance. "I want to thank you," she said after a pause, "for being kind, for seeing me when I forgot how to be seen." I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled. You helped me too, you know? How so? You reminded me that real connection isn't always about how long it lasts. Sometimes it's just about being brave enough to feel it. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. One last time. It wasn't longing anymore. It was gratitude. A silent goodbye wrapped in warmth. Take care of yourself, Evan, she said, her voice soft but steady. You too, I whispered. As I left the house, the autumn air felt lighter somehow. I glanced back once. She was still standing at the doorway, smiling in that quiet, graceful way I'd always remember. And though the world moved on, part of me knew that something inside both of us had changed forever. Not through what we said or did, but through what we felt. Sometimes love doesn't need to be claimed to be real. Sometimes it's enough that it simply existed. If the story stayed with you, even for a moment, take that as a sign. Maybe there's someone in your life who changed you quietly, without even meaning to. Someone whose presence reminded you what it feels like to be seen. Before you go, take a breath and let yourself remember them. If you felt something here tonight, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more slow burn, age gap romances that speak to the heart, not just the moment. Thank you for listening and for feeling with me.